Good afternoon, everybody. We're back again on a kind of almost Easter, think differently Thursday. My name's Helen from the Forge Church, and I've got Neil with me this afternoon. Hiya, Neil.
Hi, Helen. Nice to be with you.
And how are you this day?
I am very well. Thank you very much.
It's actually April Fool's Day, and I should have done some amazing prank on you.
Oh, no, you shouldn't.
But I can't because it's after 12 o'clock and I think it's illegal to do
Yeah, I
April
think so.
Fools after 12. Had any done today, or got any that have been really good that you kind of have either done or remember from the past?
Yeah, none today. But so I just put that down to boring older age. A couple that stand out, although they're not particularly, it was the moment rather than the huge imaginativeness of them. And you'll see that there's a theme. So we definitely did the thing where we got the girls up when they were at primary school and got them into their uniforms and gave them breakfast and got their bags packed, only to say it's Easter holidays.
That's the trick. I never did that with my kids. I never did that.
I can't believe you didn't, Helen. It went down. It was. They really didn't know whether to laugh or cry.
I was going to say, I guess there's that like real like annoyance that that's happened, but then actually, hurrah! It's not school.
Yeah, it's good news. We haven't got to go to school. I guess they were quite young, and it was probably just the older two. But there we go. And we had something similar done to us in that. In the early years of our marriage, when Anne's mum and dad wanted to go away on holiday, we would move into their house so that we were on hand for Anne's grandparents who lived in the same house. And we'd said our goodbyes the night before because Anne's parents, Joyce and Bill, were off relatively early in the morning, and we definitely were not morning people in those first few years of marriage. So it was a bit of a shock when Anne's dad, who distinctly was a morning person, burst in and said, "I'm really sorry to do this to you. It's 10 o'clock and the person who was giving us a lift hasn't turned up. So would you mind getting us up and taking us to the airport, or we're going to miss our flight?" So I sort of jumped out of bed and pulled my clothes on, rather bleary-eyed, and went out onto the landing in order to go to the bathroom. And Bill was standing there doubled up laughing because it was like 6:30 in the morning and they had just got up ready for whoever was picking them up to take them to the airport. And yeah.
And did you say a bad word?
I didn't say a bad word. It was my father-in-law. It was early days in the early-ish days in the relationship.
It's a good one. I do love pranks.
Yeah, and Anne does. So I think there must be some more that we have done or that I have had done to me, but nothing else springs immediately to mind.
Now, I work with you at church,
Yes.
but there may be some people that are kind of unaware of what you do, or maybe even who you are. But we will definitely come to that in a bit. But let's first of all let's go back to your roots. Are you a Suffolk person? Is this where life began for you?
Yeah, I'm a Suffolk boy, so my passport says I was born in Ipswich. No, it doesn't. It says I was born in Melton. So back in the day when there was a maternity home in Melton, I was born there. And the family home was in Felixstowe, and that's where I grew up. It's where I went to school. It's where Anne and I met. It's where we lived when we first got married. And we only moved out to mid-Suffolk later on.
Right. Oh, so you grew up by the sea. Did you really appreciate that, or was that kind of just like you just took it for granted because it was there?
Yeah, a bit of each, I think, in that it was just there. Did appreciate it, but actually appreciate it more now that it's further away.
Okay.
And I think there is certainly, we still have a beach hut. So we have a family beach hut in Felixstowe. We spend a lot of time there during the warmer months, shall we say, not necessarily the sunnier, but the warmer months. And we love to be there. And I think when we are there, we hanker for it. And we wouldn't mind moving back that way at some point, but that's not on the horizon. That's not on the agenda at the moment.
Right. I mean, we're really fortunate, aren't we, in that it's so accessible, it's so near, isn't it? I think for me, I can be at Felixstowe in under half an hour, which is it's enough to just go and walk along the front of an evening. It's so lovely, isn't it? Really nice. I quite like the seaside out of season as well. I quite like going for a winter walk along the seafront. I think it's lovely.
I do too, and I like Felixstowe for that. So yes, I grew up there, so I have an affection for it. But I think because of the port, Felixstowe is genuinely open 12 months a year, which some seaside places aren't. So to go there and do the breezy walk along the seafront, but then to know that you can pop into town and back in the day get a coffee or meet up with some friends is a nice thought. So I think it's got a lot going for it.
Well, of course, your parents are not in Felixstowe now. They're in New Zealand, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
So how and when did that happen?
So that happened about 25 years ago.
Okay.
My dad was working for the football club, for Ipswich Town Football Club, and so that meant he was an employee of the Football Association, and the Football Association had a policy where you had to retire at 60. And he kept it quiet for a year, but just after he had his 61st birthday, they caught up with him and said, "You've got to go." Those were the days. So he was retired and feeling that life perhaps held one more adventure. And so my sister had married a Kiwi, was living in New Zealand with a young family. And so they decided that they would go out there. They'd visited several times. They'd been on holiday. They liked it. They had the feeling that their pension would probably go a bit further out there than it would have done had they stayed here. And presumably they also decided that they preferred my sister to me, and so they moved out there.
None of us were thinking that, Neil. None of us were thinking.
And I'm not bitter.
Oh, that sounds amazing. So does that mean, so if that was, 25 years ago, you presumably have done lots of communication like this, communicating with people that are not local. Lots of us have got used to this over this year, but has this been part of your life for a long time?
Yeah, I guess it has. So when they first moved out there, there was nothing like this that was accessible to ordinary people. And so it was phone calls. And my mum was of the generation where the phone was something that sat in the hall. So in the coldest, draftiest possible place in the house. And you used it for the minimum time necessary. So she would feel if I had phoned and she had answered, and I therefore knew she was alive, that was sufficient. And it
was expensive as well, wasn't it, 25 years
and
ago?
It was expensive, so we had to, I mean, this sounds a bit mercenary, but we sort of made a calculation that for the sake of our relationship with my parents, but also for our children's relationship with their grandparents, that it was something we were going to invest in. But it would cost between £5 and £10 for a half an hour call. So that was a significant investment. And we won my mum round, and she's much better now at sitting down in a comfortable chair and having a long conversation about what's gone on and how things are. She moved to a smartphone 3 years ago at the age of 86.
Wow.
And so we're now able to use FaceTime, and I really like that, because you pick up so much more when you're actually able to see someone. And during, they've had their COVID trials there, as we have here. And that's almost been a relationship that has continued much as it normally would have done, despite the restrictions, because, as you said, we always did it. We have grown used to doing it this way.
And has COVID meant that you haven't seen them, and would there have been a visit either way between you over this last year? I know your daughter Eliza would have gone was it last Easter she was?
Yeah, so Eliza and Sam were due to be heading out there a year ago and weren't able to go, and still haven't got their money back, but we're still working on that.
Right.
And we had not planned to go last year, but my parents actually weren't very well during around this time last year, so that was the first time that they seemed frail and in need, and didn't seem to be doing a good job of identifying what the issues were and working out what they could do about it. And so the natural instinct is, right, we'll go out there and we'll just help them to work through this and be a bit of support. And of course, we weren't able to do that, and that remains the case. So the country's borders are still effectively closed, and of course it's illegal to travel from the UK at the moment, so that doesn't feel very nice. My mum will be 90 in a year's time. They're both still active and in reasonable health, but you just think, you know, they're old, so they're going to bump into issues, and the thought that we might not be able to get there is tricky.
Had it ever been on your minds over this last 25 years since they'd gone, and obviously your sister was out there at that time, was it ever on your minds to emigrate as well?
We definitely talked about it, and we have been really privileged to go to New Zealand more often than a lot of people have. The flights were always relatively expensive and pretty arduous when we seem to have a child under the age of 6 for a really long spell of time, and doing that kind of 24 hours in the air, 30 hours elapsed journey time with young kids is really not for the faint-hearted. However, once we got there, we had no expenses, so we stayed with my parents, and so that was always good. So it was and we went once every 2 or 3 years, and certainly my parents were in the habit of coming here, probably not most years, but certainly every other year, and sometimes a bit more frequently depending on what was going on in the family. And we weighed up, so we always enjoyed our times out there. It's a very long way from everywhere else. So the nearest place you can get to is Australia, and forgive me, but Australia is a little bit like New Zealand.
Right.
Whereas, 3 hours from here, you can be in Calais, which is a whole different culture, language, everything. And I really enjoy that. I think too, if the weather was the most important thing, we probably wouldn't still be living here, because we love the warmth and we love sunshine, and they definitely have more of that in Auckland than we do here, and in lots of places around the world. But actually, there's more to life than the weather, and we've prioritized some of those other things over the weather. And here we are in sunny Suffolk.
You're here and enjoying sunny weather this week. Have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, loved the sunny weather this week. It feels it's been a while coming. There's been a few little glimpses, hasn't there? And then just to have 2 or 3 days, and for that to coincide with being able to get back to the rule of 6 or 2 households outside has been a real blessing this week.
Yeah, just lovely, just lovely. So that's your parents. So tell me a bit about your family. You've mentioned Anne, and actually it's been really lovely for me. So with our groups at church recently, I really genuinely feel like I've got to meet some people that I hadn't really known very well before, and one of those was Anne, because we did a course together, and it was all
Yes.
about looking at our temperaments and how that really fed into the way you communicate and the way you kind of are perceived, and really interesting. And in fact, Anne and I discovered that we actually have the same temperament. Was it something she took? It was just all fascinating. Did she talk about it much at home?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said no. So we had some really interesting conversations around it, and just trying to relate it to some of the stuff that we've done as a staff team at the Forge around personality preference. I've come to all of that. No, that's not true, actually. I came to all of that probably in the middle of my working life, and I just wish I had been more self-aware, and that we had been more aware of each other and our preferences, and that we just see the world differently. But that's not that doesn't have to be a bad thing earlier on in our life. So I'm envious to an extent of my children, because I think on the whole they are more self-aware in those areas at a young age than I was. But yeah, we talked about it. Yeah, it's just really interesting. And something will happen like the washing up needs doing, and one of us will want to just get it done, and the other one will say, well, it would be nice to sit down now and do something else, and the washing up will still be there when we finish that, and we can do it then. And just to recognize, that's just different personalities. Doesn't really matter. Of course, one of those is the right way to do it, and one of those is not the right way to do it. But I think I'm just learning to go with it a bit more.
Of course,
really interesting.
It was doubly interesting because your daughter was on the same course as well. So they'd kind of got those interactions, and they'd often say to each other, would you agree? Is that how you see that? Yeah, it's really interesting. For me, it was like identifying some of the stuff that is my temperament. And I think just interesting doing it on Zoom as well. Sometimes you physically could see. So one of the things that I do, and it's not a good thing, is I jump in and I talk over people, and I interrupt, and it's not a good thing. And I literally could see myself doing it. Not only like people saying, is that something you do? But like, oh, I've just done it again. Stopping myself. But yeah, fascinating. Anyway, that's all an aside. Tell me how you met Anne. You said that you met her in Felixstowe, where you were. Where was that?
I did. So the story is lost a little bit in the mists of time, but the bone, and we weren't, neither Anne or I were conscious of it, because apparently our first meeting was to be weighed as when we were weighed as babies after we'd been born. And our mums got talking to each other because they were both tall and were interested to find out where the other one bought clothes and shoes, because back in the 19th century when I was born, bigger sizes of clothes and shoes for women were in short supply. And so our mums and our families haven't been close friends, but have been friends, since before Anne and I remember.
Really? So did you know each other as children? Did you kind of grow up in the same sort of circles then?
Yeah, kind of, more teenagers. So I think as children, we can remember events where, like at half term, my mum would agree with Anne's mum that we'd meet in Woodbridge, and the children could play on the swings, and then we went back to one house or the other for tea.
Right.
It didn't happen often. When I was 9, I managed to walk out onto a road in front of a car and broke quite a few bones in my body, and was in hospital for 9 months. And Anne holds it for 3 months. Anne holds it against me to this day that I got to read her copy of 5 Go to Smuggler's Top before she did. And when my mum came to visit me in hospital, my sister, who was 2 years younger than me, used to go around and play with Anne's sister, who was 2 years younger than Anne.
Right.
So the families, as I say, were in touch.
Yeah.
We went to separate primary schools. We came back together and got to know each other. We were in the same group of friends through high school, and that was really where things got going.
Oh, so when did you actually start dating?
I'll probably get this wrong and I'll be corrected.
Or in the region of
in the region of lower sixth, year 12.
Really? You've been together such a long time.
Well, Helen, yes and no.
Okay.
Because we were together for a couple of years, and then I went away to uni and the big world beckoned, and I sort of lost interest, and so we split up.
Okay.
Which I think we both look at now. I look back and think, I was a bit of an arse. Am I allowed to say that?
No. But I don't know how to edit it out, so we'll start with it.
Anne said, Anne, was sort of devastated because she said she was confident she'd get another boyfriend, fine, but she didn't think it would be someone she knew as well as she knew me, because we'd had all those going through high school together experiences together. But we got back together kind of as I graduated.
Okay.
And we've been back together since.
What a lovely story. I just have to go back to that road traffic accident. That sounds horrendous.
Oh yeah, that wasn't so good.
So you bear the scars of that still?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not. What shall I say?
Did you run out in the road then?
We lived opposite a corner shop. My mum worked on Saturday mornings. My dad cooked the lunch, and it was traditional to pop over to the corner shop and get some ice cream to have after lunch on Saturday. And we lived on a fairly main road. It was at the time the main road to the Port of Felixstowe. Lorries parked up. I ran out between two lorries and there was a car coming, and he hit me, and I broke a few bones. And actually being in hospital as a 9-year-old, and your parents weren't allowed to stay. It was pretty horrible for the first week or so. But once I felt better, I sort of settled into it, and people were lovely. People used to write to me. People used to lend me their books, and all the things that. So am I scarred? I think I never developed any interest in playing sport, and I think it was basically because I was not very good. But the other reason is that I effectively had a year and a half where I didn't play any sport, and all the other kids my age did, and they got a lot better in a year and a half. And part of my personality is that I don't like doing things if I'm not very good at doing them. And so there are consequences. But
and what about in your own parenting? Do you think it made you really kind of conscious of your own kids and safety?
I'm sure it did, but I don't remember that being a sort of overriding feature of looking after them. So I really hope the last thing I would want to be remembered as would be as a kind of alpha parent. Or a helicopter parent, always wanting to help the children. I think we always had a view that of course we wanted to look after and protect our children, but actually we wanted to equip them to be rounded individuals making their own way in the world. I think that was the overriding concern for us.
Although without any such horrendous accident. I think my arm still twitches when I cross the road near my children. I think I still go to hold them back a little bit.
And it's just a weird thing when that flips, doesn't it? And they start to be the person who holds their hand out when you go near the road, and you think, oh yeah, we've reached another milestone.
So when did you know that Anne was the one?
I think I had that sneaking suspicion. We just always got on really well, and laughed together and enjoyed doing the same things. So we were friends. And I think it was a sort of dawning realization that it could be more exciting if it was more than that. And so it proved to be.
Brilliant, brilliant. And you've alluded to your family. So just tell us about your kids or your wider family.
Yeah, we were blessed with 3 girls, Rebecca, Lydia and Eliza. And we have, on the whole, just loved being parents and having children, and the wider family is a big part of our lives. So while my sister and my parents moved to the other side of the world to get away from me, Anne's part of a big family who've always made me very welcome. So she's got 3 sisters. Her mum's sister had 3 boys, so she's got 3 boy cousins, are close in age. They used to do a lot together. So the wider family, and now that our Bex is married, and we've got Zach and Thea grandchildren, so that's a really exciting new avenue for us, a new experience, and we're really enjoying that.
Yeah. I am. So that's not a stage I'm at. You're a bit further on than me. So how does that compare? Is that weird when your kids start having children? I can't quite imagine it. It must be lovely.
Yeah, I'm not sure that appeared weird. What did take us by surprise is it feels like it's just really natural that you would feel love towards and protective of your own children. When it's a grandchild, it's that one step removed, but that instinctive bond is still there. And it's different, but it's just as strong. And we've really enjoyed being part of that.
I think I get it to a degree, but just differently. So I'm one of 3, and we're quite close in age, and yet we've had our families sort of at 10-year intervals.
Okay.
So my younger brother has little children. Well, in fact, even my older brother with his that are 10 years younger than mine. And I really identify with what you're saying. So they're just my nieces and nephew. And I love them, and I instantly loved them. Not so differently to how I felt about my own children. And it caught me by surprise because I've got lots of friends that have had children. And it was just like, wow, I just love them because they're who they are in our family. Just lovely.
So that's been really good. And Bex and John live 20-25 minutes away from us, so it's just been lovely to be part of their lives. And we've even Thea, the youngest, met the criteria of being under 1 on the 1st of December 2020, so we've been able to bubble with them through this lockdown, and that's really made such a big difference for us to be able to have the grandchildren at ours, or go and offer childcare at theirs has been really good.
And you must be a very what must you be now, sensitive or something, because you've just had all these women around you. You must be really tuned into the female kind of psyche.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know, and maybe that's a bit of self-awareness that I need to pursue. I really enjoyed having girls. It's great having Zach around now, so it is different with boys. And sister lives next door to us, and she's got 3 boys, and so certainly Eliza and her cousins have grown up more like siblings than cousins, which has been lovely. So I've had contact with boys as well, but I kind of knew my number was up because while Anne was pregnant with Eliza, my male companion in our household, who was our dog called Ben, passed away. And I knew I was on my own. But my consolation has always been, when I get old and grumpy, I should be well looked after.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's family. Tell me a bit about work for you. Did you always know the kind of trajectory you were on, the work career, as it were, or were you someone, as often is the case, that kind of knew someone and fell into something? What was your path with work?
Yeah, so honestly, no. I was one of those people who turned up at the careers office at uni after I'd sat my finals. And I can remember to this day, when I turned up and sat down in front of the careers advisor, she was speechless for a little while, and then gave me a 10-minute lecture on why I'd left it too late. So I should have been involved with working out what I needed, what I wanted to do, and applying for jobs all through my third year. And I hadn't, partly because I genuinely didn't want that getting in the way of coming away with a decent degree. But also because I hadn't got much idea what I wanted to do. So anyway, when she calmed down, she gave me a couple of A4 bits of paper to fill in, which were all about the things I was good at, the things I liked, the things I didn't like, the things I wasn't good at. And I think I accidentally ticked the box that said I was numerate. So I'm not sure I really knew what it meant, but I thought, yeah, I reckon I'm numerate. And so accountancy popped up. And I applied for some roles. One was with one of the big accountancy firms in London. And I just felt really uncomfortable at the interview because it was a group interview and I was surrounded by people who were all thrilled to be there. And frankly, I was terrified to be there. And I thought, I'm just not like these people. Okay. And I'm not sure it's going to be, I'm not sure I want to work with people like this. But I also had an interview with Fisons, who used to be a big name around here. They made fertilizers and grow bags and lots else beside. And they had a role going as an internal auditor. It meant a bit of travel, which I wanted to do, mostly UK, but I got to go abroad. And it also meant I was away from home during the week, which was a great opportunity to study towards some professional qualifications. And so I sort of fell into it. I'm still a little bit embarrassed to say I'm an accountant, but I always tried to be the kind of accountant that made the numbers make sense to people who didn't really understand numbers. And that became kind of the USP for my career, and being involved in general management. And it does give you a brilliant insight into how businesses work. So I was able to put that to use later in my career in other areas as well.
Yeah, great. And I know that related to work, sometimes there were some big decisions that needed to be made around location, I think, really. I mean, what were those biggies for you at that time, particularly when you've got family?
So when, just after Eliza was born, so late 90s, I'd been working kind of locally, although, it started, I was working locally, and then that role morphed into a role that was based in Cambridge, so that was a longer commute. And then I was headhunted, which is such a lovely experience, that you think, well, God must be in this because it feels so nice, to a company who were based on the South Coast. So they were in near Hastings, and sure enough, I got offered the job down there, and having sort of we'd prayed about it. I was definitely ready to make a move from the company I was at because it hadn't been a very nice environment for a year or so. So it felt right to do that, and so we thought, yep, this is the right thing to do. So I took a job down there. Anne was ready to hand in her notice for her job. We put the house on the market, and we had at least one weekend down in Kent, looking at houses and deciding, yeah, I wouldn't like to live here. Yeah, would like to live here. So it was a bit daunting, but quite an adventure. We squeezed in a holiday just before after I finished one job and before I started the next one. When I came back from that holiday, the company that I had just signed up with announced that it had been bought by another company. And they were very quick to reassure me that there would still be a role, but the role might not be near Hastings long term. It might be in the Thames Valley, which is where the company that acquired the company that I just joined. Sorry, this is all very complicated, isn't it? And that kind of, so we said, whoa, okay, this is not looking like a sensible or a wise thing to do, to move to Kent, if in 6 months' time we might then have to move again to the Thames Valley. So actually, they allowed me to do a sort of twice weekly commute. So I would drive down and stay overnight for a couple of nights, and then go back down for the Thursday, and usually come home on the Thursday night and work at home on the Friday, in the early days of working from home. So the IT infrastructure wasn't great, but they were willing to do that, and I worked there. And then sure enough, my role moved over to Bracknell, and we thought, right, well, this is it then. We'll move to Bracknell instead. And that just didn't work out. And I started traveling, so I had some European responsibilities. So quite often during the week, I'd be away for 2 or 3 nights. And again, it just felt like it would not be wise to put the family through relocating new schools, and not being able to work, losing all her network of friends and family here, only for me not to be around for half the time. And so we developed life as long distance commuting, weekly commuting. So I lived away I tried to make it 3 nights. So there's always something important to me about having more nights at home than I had away, and most of the time we could make that work. But it's not what you sign up for or expect when you get married to someone, and I don't think it's what you expect when you have children, because it definitely put the burden of day to day looking after the children on Anne, because I just wasn't here. So we had to work through that.
So what was your process for working through things like that? How did you make those big decisions as family? What was your process?
We would do the things that you would expect us to do as Christians. So we definitely prayed about it. We definitely spoke to a small number of people who we trusted about it, but didn't spread the net too wide, because I think that always found the danger is if you spread the net wide enough, you will get the answer you want. It's better to keep the net narrow to people you really trust and who know you, and whose advice you can trust, even if it's not the advice you want to hear. And we also talked about it. So life is busy, and actually we're not terrifically good at talking about things, either sitting down and talking about it or just talking about it while life is going on. We've always had to make opportunities, and for us that was, we'll go for a walk.
Okay.
So we've always made that part of our routine, to go for a walk. Even when the kids were young, we would have a babysitter once a week so that we could go out for a walk, and that was our opportunity just to talk things through. And I think realizing that there was an alternative to the assumed path, which was, well, you've got to go where if you've got to go with the job, that actually you could make it work differently, and we could make it work. And it was very early days of mobile phone technology. But actually we had phones even when we didn't have mobile phones, and all the way through, just that being in touch every day, checking in, making sure we knew what was going on with each other, was really important. And we would, I can remember times where I would sit in a hotel room watching something on television with the line open to Anne, and she would be watching the same thing, and the line would be open. And we probably would hardly speak for an hour while it was on, but we would communicate. You would say, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that," or you'd laugh out loud together at something that was funny.
Wow, it's almost like you're a bit ahead of the game, because I think that's what that's what people have been doing now, isn't it? Like streaming stuff at the same time to watch. But yeah, you were doing it.
Oh, absolutely, Helen. I'll take that compliment. Me ahead of the time, cutting edge. I really like that. Thanks. Can we end it there?
Yeah, and that's what I'll write in the kind of write-up, trendsetter. I love that stuff about being intentional about the communication and walking. I think, and to think that you actually set aside a time, even when you've got a young family, to do that, I think is incredible. I think we can fall into the trap of thinking that we're together because we're in the same space, and you are in the same space and you are together. But I think it's really easy to only have snatched conversation, particularly when you've got a young family as well. I think to actually carve out time to communicate, it's just, brilliant. It's obviously served you really well.
Yeah, it has. That shared space is important as well. But that's necessary, but it's not sufficient. We found we needed something in addition to that, in order for our relationship not just to survive that, but actually to thrive and grow.
So you talked about faith. So were your parents Christians? Did you grow up in a Christian family? Where did it all start for you?
My parents had both. My parents grew up in Ipswich, and met and married in Ipswich, and had both been part of Girls' Brigade and Boys' Brigade, and had really enjoyed that, and it'd been an important part of their life. So although we as a family didn't attend church when I was a young child, they did send my sister and me to Sunday school, and there was a spinster over the road who was a teacher in the Sunday school, and so my mum would walk us over the road on a Sunday afternoon, and Diane would then walk us along to the church where the Sunday school was, and we'd do Sunday school, and then she'd walk us home again afterwards. And from that, then there were midweek kids clubs, and from that, the youth club. Anne went to her family were very involved in a Brethren assembly in Felixstowe, and she and her sisters grew up there. But they came to the youth club at the church that my parents had sent me to Sunday school at, and so that's partly how we came to be in the same friendship group. And actually, I think it was just the story of making friends with people who had Christian faith, and being challenged and sometimes I have to say, slightly frightened into thinking I really need to make this personal for me, and I did at some point during my teenage years.
Yeah, great. And would you say that it's been a consistent journey of faith? Would you be able to recall any kind of times where maybe you had doubts about it or walked away from it?
I don't think there have been any times yet where I've got to the point where I have thought I might give up on this. I think it's always been, and that probably is, yeah, we're back to personality. I'm relatively steady by nature. I value slow, steady work, start at the beginning, finish at the end. In sharp contrast to my wife, who is definitely not a completer finisher. But yeah, so I think temperament comes into that as much as anything. There have definitely been periods when my faith has been challenged and stretched, and those have been real growth spurts for me. And you know, the most recent one of those is probably only about 5 years ago, and coincides to coming to the church. So it's not just a that's what happened when I was young. That's been the pattern of my life. I have plenty of doubts. I think when you're confronted with stuff, sometimes you don't know what the answer is. Sometimes you do know what the accepted answer is, but it's just really hard to believe in it, and it doesn't sometimes seem very tangible in the face of suffering or in the face of injustice, or anything like that. And it's quite there's so much stuff associated with Christianity, and I think it's sometimes good to challenge that, and to realize that all of that is not the important stuff. What it actually comes down to is a personal relationship with someone who said he was going to die and rise again, and did. And that, thankfully, has been a real anchor in more difficult times.
I think that whole area of suffering is such a stumbling block to so many people, isn't it? I think, you know, even this time we're living through a pandemic, and 120,000 plus people having died in our own country, would cause some people to say, how can you have faith in a God, and how does your God allow this to happen? And we've heard it forever, you know, people are suffering in the world all of the time, aren't they? And that is people's question, and I think it makes faith difficult for some people. How do you answer that?
So I think I used the link to the talk that Leon Evans did a few weeks ago and say, listen to this, because this guy explains it really well and better than I'm going to. But it just about that. I think it depends who you're talking to, doesn't it? And where they are in terms of faith. So I think, you know, there are questions I don't know answers to. There are questions which I think I have some answers to, which satisfy me, but I recognize they might not satisfy you. And I'm happy to share those, but I really think so much damage can be done by just trying to say to people, oh, it's simple. You know, God lets it happen because people are bad. Well, that begs as many questions as it answers. So I'm kind of not answering it, but I think for me it does come down to that. Am I having a real experience of a personal God and Father, yeah, I have, and I can't deny that, and so I can't say I don't believe that. And I struggle with some of the things that you struggle with as well. So,
and I think it's great to be authentic with people, isn't it? And to say, actually, yeah, it's really hard to get your head around that, or I don't understand that myself. I think it's good to be authentic about it.
Yeah.
Neil, for people that don't know, tell us what your role is at the Forge.
Okay. So I'm a member of the staff team. I do about 3 days a week and look after lots of the stuff that other people don't like looking after. So I think I'm director of operations. So sort of money falls within that. HR falls within that, processes, IT, but also just helping the staff team and helping us as a church to get really clear on what it is we want to achieve, what we need to do to achieve that, and then have a plan that we can start and continue through and get to the end of is really where my passion is, and where I think I've got some strengths that I'm able to bring to the party, and that exist to varying degrees in other people on the staff team, but I've probably got it stronger than most.
Definitely. And I know there's a lot of things that you do that I'm not involved with, but certainly the things where I am, I just value you so much. And I think, what you're saying about you really, you bring cohesion to us as a team about where we're going and what we're doing, but also accountability as to so, okay, what are you doing, but how are you going to do it? And when is that going to be done by? And then we meet with you monthly and we check in about how we're doing with those things. And I think, you keep us all on track. I think that's a massive thing that you do in our team, that you just keep us really focused on what it is that we're doing, which is absolutely brilliant. I can't imagine our team without you. I was going to say that Steve on Sunday talked about just the important part in volunteering and serving within church, and what your part in it all is. And for me, I think it's a big part of our faith. I think it is what we're called to know what our role is, and so that's why we would really encourage people to volunteer. But mostly, in my experience, people are doing their job and they are volunteering alongside that in other time that they have. You, though, gave up your income and job in order to volunteer. This is an unusual situation. Tell us about that and how you came to that decision.
I think you make me sound nobler than I was in putting it like that. And certainly for years, my experience was I'm away during the week working. I'm at home at the weekend. So the weekend is the only time that I've got for my family and to spend time with them and to do church. And I always recognized that, part of our calling, as Steve pointed out on Sunday, is to serve. Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve. And I've always wanted to take that seriously, but also wanted to constrain that to reasonable limits, so that I had what felt to us as a family a decent balance between work, family, and church. And I'd encourage anyone to do that and not to be bullied into taking on more than they should for the church.
Because there should be a real joy in that, shouldn't there? There should be a real joy in serving. It shouldn't be arduous and and we really encourage people to find their passion, don't we? Don't do stuff that's not you, that doesn't fit with you. Just what is your passion, and do it for us.
And I think because we're a largish church, there's so much opportunity for people with all kinds of different passions to find something that they can do. And I think it makes such a difference. And if you see people, when you see people who are volunteering, and in volunteering they're pursuing their passion, it's so exciting and it's so productive, and it also energizes them. So even though they're putting into the life of the church, they're getting energy from that, and it's building them up in their faith while they're doing it. So that's been important. I think serving also gives a connection. So our experience when we started coming to the Forge, I'm trying to think when that was. It was probably about 7 years ago. So that's also beginning to be lost in prehistory. But we actually found it very difficult to break in. So every week you came along and you saw completely different people from the people that you'd seen the week before, and you'd have a conversation with someone, and then you might never see that person again, or that was how it seemed. And we tried to get involved in groups, but we couldn't break into that. And an opportunity came up to serve, and we said, yeah, we'll do that. And so we started on the breakfast rota at Debenham, and it really opened a door to get to know some people and to feel part of what was going on.
I think Anne said that in the comments on Sunday morning. She said, you know, that was really key for her. Beginning to serve was where she began to really feel that community sense within church.
So that was important. I think so. I'd moved from just being a regular accountant, because it's such a grind sometimes. Being an accountant in big companies, because it's relentless, month after month after month. So I was working for public companies, and every month the analysts would be on the phone wanting to know whether your results this month were slightly better than they had been the month before, and relentless. And so I moved more into project management, still associated with finance a lot of the time, but helping implement big multinational projects, like putting in new systems and changing processes and the way things that got done. And I loved that, because it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there'd be a big razzmatazz when you launched the project, and then you'd work your way through it. And when you got to the end, you'd have a party. I don't think I ever had a party while I was doing traditional accountancy. But the issue with projects is they come to an end. And for a while, it worked well for me in that as one project came to an end, another one opened up, either for the same company or moving to a different company and organization. And then I was working on a project that came to an end much more quickly than I had expected. And to some extent, I was the architect of its demise, in that I was one of the voices saying, I'm really not sure this is going to work. And so my instinct was, right, need to get my name out to the recruitment agencies and make sure that I get make sure I get another job and keep the monthly salary coming in. And it was Anne, as it so often is, who says, hang on a minute. We've been thinking and talking and praying that this stage of our life with older children, so I think at that point Eliza was about to start university, that this is a time where we could be freer to do something different. So show us the way forward, and maybe this is it. And I said, no, it can't be it, because Eliza's only starting at university, and we want to help her financially to get through university. And of course, Anne was right. But it took a little while just to sort of work through that and to recognize that I didn't need a monthly income in the way that I had a monthly income for us to live, and that here was a need that I could fill. and here we are.
And you have, and so
5 years later.
So these 3 days that you work for the church, you're not paid. You are a volunteer.
Yeah, that was a bit of a muddle to start with, because I'm sure Steve said I would be paid, and I said yes on that basis. And I think what Steve had actually said was, in a year or so's time, we will make room in the budget so that we can pay you for what we do. But actually, having realised that that was not necessary for us, I have said no, I'd prefer just to keep it on the basis that I am at the moment. And if COVID is, well, if the vaccines and everything else are kind to us and restrictions pale, I do want to travel. And it's much easier to say, well, I'm not going to be around for the next 4 weeks if you're a volunteer than it is if you're an employee. So let's not pretend it's a one-way street. There's some good in it for us as well.
There are huge benefits for us. I know we're so grateful to you for all that you do. I find it absolutely fascinating. I love this part of what I do, just being able to talk to people and find out about people's lives. I have a genuine interest in, how people navigate life and what it is they do. And I think, because I think we both had big parties around the same sort of time, I think you're about 10 years ahead of me in this whole life game. And so just thinking back to what you said about your parents and emigrating, and that your dad had sort of felt like there's another big adventure, or there's one big thing left to do or something. Is it something that's on your mind? Is there a kind of like, what's the next big thing? Is there a next big thing?
So I do feel, and have felt for a long while. So a verse from Isaiah became very real to me, and perhaps to a lesser extent to Anne, where Isaiah talks about you shall go forth with joy. And I felt that was a word to the two of us, that there would be something that God had for us to do together. I think, though, my experience has been that whenever I have looked for a big thing to go and do, God's always said, that's not really what I've got in mind for you. What I've got in mind for you is something steadier and a bit more in the background, and a bit more ordinary in some ways. And I found that a little bit hard at times, because other people have big things and their lives just turn around and suddenly they're off doing something really exciting. So I kind of hold that tension between, I do believe that the adventure continues and that God will have new and different things for us to do and to be involved in, but I'm not convinced it will be another big, I'm not sure it will be one big adventure. I think it will just be a life, a full life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely it does. Yeah, definitely. It has been so interesting talking to you, Neil. I've really loved it. Just one last question. So we are, as a church, we are now a year on from when everything changed and that first lockdown. 3 months into this year, and 3 months from when we're going to come back together again at the end of June for that first time. And I think it would be impossible for anyone to look back on this year and not recognise that we've learned stuff about ourselves, we've learned stuff about our jobs and our relationships, and even just the way that we relax and have downtime, I think. What would you hope that we have learned as a church that we will take into this next phase, this next season that we're heading for as church?
Yeah, I think one disappointing thing that has come to light during the restrictions is that for some people who call the Forge their home, having denied them the opportunity to come to church physically every Sunday, they really seem not to have had very much to fall back on. So I really hope and believe as we go forward, it's going to be important for us to be helping all of us to really take responsibility for our own faith and the development of that faith, and for living a life in the way that Jesus wants, as well as equipping us to do that. And I love that that's in our mission to help people find and follow Jesus. And it's not just about new people who haven't had faith before finding Jesus and then following him, although I think that's really important. It's also about, you know, people who've been following him for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or 40 years or longer than that, being inspired and equipped to take ownership of that and to continue to follow him. I think it's been exciting during lockdown that while we haven't been able to do the things we normally do, we have been able to carry on with our mission of helping people find and follow Jesus. And we've held close to that, and we've been able to do it. And it's exciting that we will be able to continue doing that, doing some of the things that we love doing face to face, as well as doing the things that we've grown used to doing online. So I think the art is just going to be in deciding, or reminding ourselves, there's a universe of possibilities out there of all the things we could do. We need to pick a relatively small number and do them well, so that as a staff team and as a team of volunteers, we don't burn ourselves out by spreading ourselves too thinly. Yeah, that's great. Oh, I've said it already, but yeah, really, really lovely to chat to you, to find out more about your life, and just to share in some of your experiences. So thank you for the time that you've given me today. And again, thank you for all the time that you give to us as a church. I know as a staff, we benefit hugely, and we're just so grateful to you. So thank you. Enjoy your Easter weekend. What have you got planned for the weekend? Meeting up with people, no doubt. Yeah, a bit of meeting up, see, I think it might be a little cooler, so but we'll definitely want to get out and about a little bit, and just see some people. That will be great. Yeah, well, do enjoy. Thank again, you very much. Thank you, really lovely. See ya. You're welcome. Bye.